Oh, they're back. That was
Okay.
interesting, Nancy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to share.
I was just going to send you a text and how do I fix this? But it got better.
Okay, no, you're fine. I don't know.
So while we're waiting for the record, it was Spies Like Us 1985 with, hold it.
I'm not gonna lie, I just thought you were gonna ask me a question.
Oh, shoot. Yeah,
Chevy
Chevy Chase, right? It's your assignment. Watch it.
Okay,
Dr.
so,
Lee.
I love
okay, cool. Yeah, I was just explaining the other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the second document you should have will say adopted rule at the top. You'll see the date is blocked out because we're not at that point yet. So this document, what it does, this is what will be filed to make your rules go into effect. This is our conditional approval response with all track changes accepted, so it's nice and clean. There are 2 additional amendments, edits, minor edits. So what happens, OLS can comment on all the drafts that we file. And when we filed the amended conditional approval request, they made 2 minor comments, editorial only. Changing is to shall and will to shall. So the
Shall
only
and
change-
what? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's on page 15. At the very bottom of the adopted rule.
Of the adopted rule.
Yeah,
Okay.
OLS had 2 minor edits. In the first line of 20601, the purpose of this part, we had is, they asked to change it to shall be. So in the
Mhm.
adopted rule, I had done that. And then the second line right underneath it, after general public, we had will, and they also asked for us to change that to shall. So I had done that as well. That is not track change because it's an edit at the adoption stage and it doesn't have to be. So what will happen in my cover letter, I will just say, cite where they had made those editorial comments and that we had changed them. So they know to go there that we've changed it. So once we get the approval, we can file this adoption immediately and get it on the books. And it'll be effective at 12/01 the following day. Expect that. I don't know if because these are board rules that the reviewing attorney, he may turn it around today. So we may be able to file the adoption today. Typically, it takes within a day to a week or so before they can turn them around. So we don't have to come back to vote on the adopted rule. I had both ready. So I will need a vote for both.
For both.
Yeah. With the caveat that the adopted rule, the date will change to whenever we receive the written confirmation from OLS. I'll just change the date up there and then I'll email you a cover letter.
So I move conditional approval response. That we pass conditional approval response. Would we approve conditional approval? Whichever way it works.
Thank you. You have a motion to approve a second. Roll call, Senator Sherman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy, Dr. Murphy.
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Representative Marsh,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. It passed.
So this is the cover letter for that. I just need you to sign it. File that today
And so in follow-up, you need a separate motion, right?
for the adopted rule. Yep.
So I move to adopt the adopted rule. Since we're in Dr. mode.
I'll say.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to accept the adopted rules in a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Roll call, Senator Sherman,
Yes.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
Dr. Woodward,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
President Marsh,
Yes.
chair votes yes. We're done.
And with that, congratulations, you made it through the room, I think.
Yeah.
It's really been a pleasure. Looking forward to working with you again eventually, but not too soon, right?
Right, I was gonna say, the time to start
Oh,
our.
right.
Thank you.
Right. And also, Attorney Barry, if you want to give us an update on what we talked about with Nathan White and.
Sure. So for the record, Rob Berry, General Counsel, Division of Medicaid, and also the liaison between the department and the board. So in light of the adoption or the anticipated adoption of the PDAB rule, Chairman and I met with Nathan White, who's the CFO of the department, Mary Calise, who's the deputy CFO of the department, and Beth Kelly, who is the finance director for the office of the commissioner, to discuss the next steps with respect to establishing an accounting unit for the board so that it could begin to receive funds and complete its setup process, so to speak. So we had a very productive conversation. The CFO agreed that in light of SB 450, we were in a position that we could begin to set up the accounting unit. In speaking with the deputy CFO yesterday, Mary Calise, she indicated that process had already begun and that it should be set up and ready to go no later than the end of December. And at that point, the finance committee the finance unit within the department could begin to send out invoices for collecting assessments and fees. The one thing we really need to nail down, though, in order to really outline the process is next step is the memo of understanding, which has kind of been hanging out there for a while now. So that is my next big objective for this board, is to get that memo of understanding ready to go. And it is mostly completed. There will need to be some changes to it. I'll be working with Sherry Phillips at the Attorney General's office to finalize those. My hope is that we can have that finalized by the next board meeting, assuming it's not next week. That from then we should have the finance piece ready to go, and that the board can begin collecting fees and assessments.
Saying that, that sounds like we need to possibly look at our calendars for another meeting early January. Does that seem feasible?
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair? Does this mean that we do not any longer need that tabled item in fiscal?
Correct, because the table item, there's two parts to it, Senator Rosenwald. One part was to create an accounting unit within the budget because the statute didn't create a non-lapsing account. And the other request was to front load, if you will, the board with some funds to get the board up and running financially.
Okay,
Point in time, because the statute created the non-lapsing account, that need went away. And as far as the cash flow, if you will, if we can get the invoices out within the next 30 to 60 days, we'll be able to receive money before we actually have to incur a lot of expenses.
great. Thank you.
Just to follow up to that is, so this is not a dedicated fund and we don't have a non-lapsing fund, is that correct?
It's a dedicated fund and it's non-lapsing.
And it's non-lapsing.
Yes.
It is non-lapsing. Okay, great.
But
And a
let me
follow-up to the-
just reiterate, if I could, that doesn't, it's not bulletproof. Because the legislature can always vote to suspend
Yeah.
any provision, so
Yeah.
it is better than nothing, but it's not bulletproof.
And that's why you're there, Cindy. You'll be the wall.
I'm gonna be the wall.
Quick question.
Yeah.
If you said 30 to 60 days, but it's going to be at least, if we talk about early January. That's, what is that? It's gonna, so you're thinking of starting the billing process in January after this meeting?
Well, after this meeting here, we don't need the board actually to reconvene to send out the invoices.
Don't we need an
But
MOU?
we need an MOU, which would be as far as the relationship between the board and the Department of Human Services.
Right, but Attorney Barry is saying that we need a vote of the board to accept the MOU. So just thinking
Okay.
timing wise, we can't send out any invoices until after the MOU is complete.
We shouldn't, correct, because I think Mr. White would prefer to have the MOU in place before they actually send the invoices out, but he's in the process, I understand, probably putting the mechanism in place to accomplish that.
So as soon as we say yes, then it can start immediately.
Yeah, so we have to get the MOU, finalized, and that's, like I said, we're pretty close, and we have been pretty close for a while. It's been one of those items that's kind of been on the back burner due to the rules and such, but, in speaking with the CFO since the last meeting, I provided the draft MOU, and he added some comments and ideas to it. I need to run that by Attorney Phillips at the AG's office as well, who's counsel to the board, to see how she feels about it and what her view of it is. I do have I have been in contact with her about other things, so I was gonna add this to the list of things to speak to her about as well, but I do believe that we can have it accomplished by early January.
Okay, I'm just pointing out that we have still a few remaining bodies in the legislative body, and it's going to be ramping up rapidly. Their time is going, so we can't just keep necessarily having board meetings like we've been doing.
Understood?
So if you can bring all that together for the next meeting,
Yes.
so we don't have to keep asking them to show up, and I think, just recognizing the time is critical.
Yes, understood.
Okay.
So if we could look at our calendars, I'm looking for this, I believe the legislative session will not start actively until after the 4th.
Right.
So we could meet on the 3rd, the day before that, and Tuesday, or we could possibly meet on Thursday. We can't meet on the 4th because that's gonna be session day. But we could possibly meet on the 5th, which would be the Thursday.
Isn't the 5th usually a active day?
Oftentimes, yeah.
I would say the 3rd.
3rd. We meet the 3rd, say,
What time?
if we could do 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I have something in the morning, but I can move that if we have to.
I'm open.
What day is that?
It's January 3rd, Central Rosewell.
Okay.
Tuesday.
You look
It's a
at that.
Tuesday,
So 1 to 3.
1 to 3. Does that work for you, Central Rosewell?
Yes, yes.
Dr. Marsh? Mr. Marsh? Okay.
Yes, it's fine.
Oh, you know. January 3rd. Here. I assume, do we know the room is gonna be available or not? That's the other question.
Oh, we can find
I'm
a
not gonna
space.
check my calendar, I scheduled about public hearings for that week.
All right. Chime in.
Hang on.
January 3rd,
3rd.
it's not available,
No, they said 1 to 3, right?
1 to 3.
there's 1 o'clock now.
Oh, I was looking at your calendar, I apologize.
Oh, yeah, if it's not available, it's not because of me.
It's getting cold.
What about 10 o'clock?
All right, that's good.
It's actually it's pretty booked out.
It's not available that afternoon.
No,
3 to 4.
On Monday,
Monday's available.
I could do Monday.
Monday,
Oh,
it's
Monday's
a holiday.
holiday, what?
available.
Sorry, what about 3 to 4?
Oh, the 3rd, that's my wedding.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Was there any other
5.
place to meet?
Where's that place?
Hold on. Hold on, I might be able to help you here. What time are you looking, 1 to 3?
1 to 3.
Anytime in the
time is
afternoon.
good?
So there are
Two to three?
two, so 1 to 1:30 and then 2 to 3.
So why don't we
So
do
what I can do,
I know it's.
I
the
can
5th
have.
Thursday is usually,
Right, but it's, you have it right after the
We will-
opening day, I'm not sure that.
Yeah.
big session day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's Friday, it's Friday.
Hold on, we got Tuesday.
Yeah, no, so I'm gonna have my employee move those to a
Oh,
conference
okay.
room instead, because nobody will show up. for
All right,
public
thank
hearings.
you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So,
So
Is
1 to
it-
3, Tuesday the
Okay.
3rd.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't leave.
Yeah. So, in saying that, but then again, two questions. You're gonna be working with the fiscal unit here.
Yep.
To get the process in place.
Yes.
You're gonna work with Sherry and with Nathan on the MOU.
Yeah, to finalize the MOU,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're gonna come back on the 3rd, approve the MOU with the understanding at that point in time, once you get the MOU in place, we can start putting the invoices out.
That's my understanding, yes.
Could I also recommend we get a look at what the invoice looks like, so we all know what's
Looks like-
going out?
Sure,
Yeah, I can try to get a draft invoice for you guys to look at.
That'd be great.
that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think I should be able to get
And
one.
if we can have a draft of the same thing as the MOU. Now, is that something we have to discuss with Sherry, with Attorney Phillips in the non-meeting meeting? Before we go public with it, or do we have, what's the process?
I know in the past, we presented a couple of drafts
Yes.
and it has been discussed internally in the non-meeting meeting. I think it's more for the board to decide if they have questions on issues that might implicate attorney-client privilege. So once you get a copy of that draft, I think that's where the board will have to decide how it wants to proceed. If there's no questions, I don't know if you need to decide that. In a non-meeting meetings, I think it will be a public document once it's signed, of course.
Right.
Once you have the draft, I think is when you can make that decision as a board.
The draft will be going out to the board members the week before.
My aim is to have it before, 2 weeks before, so you guys can have a chance to look at it beforehand.
What I'm concerned about is that in the statute, documents that are shared in a public meeting have to be made public
Yes,
7 days before.
yes.
So when do we make the document public? Because if we deliberate on the 3rd and we go into a non-meeting, we can't share the document ahead of time. Because at that point in time, we would not get into, or unless you want to share the document, but we have deliberations on the document and non-public.
I don't think we need to have a non-public.
If there's anything in there,
I don't believe there's anything in there that's confidential.
Controversial.
Yeah, confidential or controversial. I mean, the only reason I view it as a non-public document at this point in time is because it's a draft. So after it's finished and presumably ready to be signed, I would believe it would be a public document at that point.
so in saying that. Even the meeting on January 3rd, we have to back it up, it has to be posted on the website week before.
Correct.
Are we gonna run into problems with staff being able to get that on the board website?
No, we don't have anything else to do.
Okay, so
And I
okay
will-
with that part.
Yes, and I will endeavor to have it to you, Mr. Chair, the week before that, so you
Thank
can take a look
I
at it.
appreciate that, yes, thank you. All right, awesome, and then in
Our
regards.
Christmas wrap.
It'll be.
We'll have a bow on it?
Yeah, I can do that, yeah. Go on it.
So I did want, Senator Rosenwald and also Representative Marsh, you may or may not have received this. This is the document that we put before the Joint Fiscal Committee, Legislative Committee, in regards to the request for funding from fiscal. You want to pull it up? I just share it with you now because at the meeting, talking about a budget for the board. And I wanted to sort of ground us today and have a discussion on what that would look like. If there's other things inside of the budget you folks think need to be included that were part of here. If we're basically having any kind of discussion in regards to maybe the amount of funds put into each line item. Per se, one of the things I'll bring to people's attention, when we first did this way back in December of 2021, a year ago. Wow. So anyways, in saying that, we had a classified position that was changed to an unclassified because of the reasons we talked about before. In talking to at least look at the documents I've seen, I believe the salary before we get into benefits for that classification was gonna be around 110, 120,000 a year.
Working off of memory, that seems correct.
Approximate.
It was definitely in that range, yes.
And the benefits are running approximately 30 to 40% of the salary.
So the benefits should be static, because this is based on the LBA worksheet we use for when we are estimating the costs in fiscal note worksheets of what positions would be. So this assumes, I think, a two-person plan. So all that should remain the same.
So in the other question in here, we had a temporary personnel appointment that may become permanent. Because I'm looking for the staffing requirements. I'm trying to get a feel of what the board thinks we need to have to run the board. There needs to be an executive director. That person's primary responsibility is really networking with state agencies, other departments, coordinating things and so forth. So a lot of it's going to be as much external as internal. The day-to-day, therefore, if there's nobody in the office, how do we run the office? Do we need to have an assistant there? That's one question. The other one's going to be as a data analyst. We could do that one or two ways. We could either hire somebody to be a data analyst, or we could contract it out to University of New Hampshire, maybe to Dartmouth College, and do it through contract service. Senator Sherman?
My leaning would be to have an executive director and an administrative assistant that they actually hire. And that we leave it up to the executive director to create their team, what they think is necessary. They'd have to come back to us. But I don't think we want to be in the position of micromanaging the executive. We want to be providing oversight, but not. So I would start with the executive director and let them then hire their administrative assistant, but I would anticipate at least those two positions.
My thinking, if I could, is that we should not try to create a new permanent position, but that the department should find one that they have that is vacant and use that.
So at that point in time, Senator Roswell, if we're looking for a vacancy within the Department of Health and Human Services, moving that position over to the board?
I think you could do that because that's what we've done on the opioid abatement advisory commission. That is an independent commission, it's statutory. But we wanted to be able to use some of the settlement funds to hire a staff person. And the Department of Health and Human Services told us they could just find one of their vacant positions. So we didn't have to create a new position.
Sounds good. I mean, we can get.
I don't know how to do it, but the
would-
department.
Yeah, I believe it'd be a conversation between the commissioner and the chair about how that would work. It's for you guys to work out.
Work it out.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get new permanent positions through the legislature. When really the approach the legislature has been taking is to eliminate positions.
Thank you. Relative to what Senator Sherman said about, micromanaging, it would seem like, to me, you've got the executive director on board, that's approved already now. And rather, in order to avoid micromanaging their department, maybe, you've got at the bottom here, contractual program service, 75,000. I would think initially that executive director could use those to either contract out if need be initially, and then say, I can't, I don't need that much.
Yeah.
Or I need to have an administrative assistant, and then try to backfill one of the currently vacant spots, but, hire them with the intent that they're gonna run it, hire as needed, but use the program services, contract program services to at least start up the data gathering, whatever is necessary.
That makes sense. I mean, I didn't mean to, Mike, I want to be sure as we build the budget.
Yeah.
The bottom line is what I'm looking at, that there's enough dollars there to do what the executive director needs to do. So as we build out the budget, that's what I'm trying to get to, is that in order to have a budget in place, so the executive director puts on board, there's funds in there for them to work with.
Yeah.
And let them decide how to utilize the funds, but if we only put $200,000 in there and we don't have enough. So that to justify, we have to as a board justify how we get to the bottom line.
Yeah.
I agree with you, I think. So I'm looking at the bottom line more than anything else and try to figure out what the lines are to get to the bottom. And let the executive director, obviously, I agree with you. Manage their own budget.
Clarification,
Yes.
apologies for being catch up here. As I understood it initially, the exec director initially was a classified, then became unclassified, and you were talking about over 100,000. But it's back at classified at 85.
At the time when we put this together back in December a year ago, we had a classified position. It was not unclassified until we passed the LSR, the bill. To change the statute. The
Okay.
statute would have passed, Bob. At that point, change it from classified to unclassified,
So what is it now?
unclassified.
So
So
should
this
it
is a
be,
budget that is 85.
Yeah, this is not a budget. This is more of a discussion document to discuss the budget.
Okay,
Okay, what I'd like to do is, based upon our discussion here, is come back in January with an actual budget, but I want to be sure whatever's in the budget that I haven't missed
okay,
something.
okay. So this was the start. This was,
To start the conversation. It's not to approve.
this is the December, gotcha.
Yeah. It's to have a conversation at some place with Travis.
so the only question I have is the in-state travel, is that by helicopter? 25,000,
Don't get it.
25K?
I certainly thought that was high, Senator, but I was not in a position to.
Having driven the state multiple times, I would have
Could use the
loved that
helicopter.
helicopter.
I think there is an effort to overestimate, as opposed to underestimate.
Some price factor.
But I agree, that does seem a bit high.
Generous.
It would seem to me that, that bottom line that you're focused on is appropriate, especially in light of the salary. And then, allowing them to kind of develop the department and with that flexibility. It would seem to me like you've got plenty of monies in there, at least to start.
To start it with. So right now, again, from a personnel point of view, we're looking for the executive director, an assistant. The analyst, as far as that goes, do we
Contract out.
contract out? Okay. Okay, and then as far as the rest of it's gonna go, depending upon the MOU, because I'm sure Mr. White's gonna include in the MOU the cost of things we use within the Department of Health and Human Services, space and so forth, all that we spelled out as far as what the costs are.
That was something he brought up during our conversation, and I think it's something that needs to be fleshed out more in the MOU.
The assistant would be that position Cindy was talking about that we'd be swiping from an existing.
Take a
position.
vacated one. Yeah. And move it. I can work out with that. Is that the commissioner?
That's a conversation between, yes, the chair and the commissioner. I don't have authority to see to that.
So in saying that, I'll work on a budget. I'll work with Mr. White on that as far as the MOU, see what's in dollars and so forth, to bring back something to the board officially to review and accept and discuss at the January meeting. That's right.
Just following up on this document, is the whole board aware that this was tabled and died?
No.
Okay, so did you want to?
What happened was, this went to joint fiscal committee. I think Senator Rosenwald back in December, I believe, or maybe it was in January. Anyways, it got to the meeting, we had a discussion at that time. There was concerns about the rules, some concerns about cash flow and so forth. The committee elected to table the request. So it's been sitting on the table since at least January of this year.
Yeah, because that item was labeled in December, so it was either January or it was last December.
And I think Senator Rosenwald, what happened at the last meeting, which was in November, anything that's on the table because we're at a end of a term automatically dies.
Right, yes.
But the issues that this raised were dealt with both through the bill we passed last year and through rulemaking.
Yes.
So this became unnecessary. I just wanted to make sure the board was fully, everybody was aware.
And that's when I had a conversation at the meeting with Nathan White, Mr. White from Department of Health and Human Services. He asked the same question about, do we need this or not? And I said, at that point in time, to your point, based upon the statute that passed, we don't need it. All right, so my marching orders are to work with Attorney Berry on the MOU, come back with the board with some sort of revised budget for the January meeting. And do you think we have the annual report printed off by now?
Yes, would you like that?
Please, thank you. You can pause it if you want to, at least the recording.
So there are three things coming in January. There's the
MOU.
MOU,
Invoice.
the budget, and the invoice, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Draft invoice.
Yeah.
Give it to the start.
Back from recess, technical glitches. In regards to board members, you should have those in the public. Jason, you can. For the board members and for those that are in the public here, they should have 3 documents before you or in front of you. Either way. So there should be one, it says the Prescription Drug Affordability Board Annual Report 2022. Second one should be why New Hampshire needs to monitor prescription drug prices. And the third one is the chapter on the data analysis that was done, because in the statute, there's a requirement that we identify the top 25 highest used. We talked about the 25 highest price and the 25 with the price increases. That's required by statute. So again, Dr. Woodward, this is your handiwork. I want to say again, thank you. If you want to walk us through what you did,
Yes.
that'd be helpful.
So 3 documents. The one with the Prescription Drug Affordability Board 2022 annual report. Let's start with that. That represents taking the 2021 annual report and replacing the minutes of 21 with the minutes of 22, replacing the presentations of 21 with the presentations of 22. It is formatted exactly as to the best of my ability, like the 2021 report. I edited the introduction section just lightly. And my suspicion is that the board might want to look at that. And I did not do much at all with the summary section from 2021. Again, I was thinking that I viewed my role here as kind of a formatting and organizing, if not pontificating about what the board did and putting it in words that would speak to the legislature's concerns. That's the first document. The second document is why New Hampshire needs it to monitor prescription drug prices. That represents what I thought of as an additional chapter early in the annual report. Talking a little bit about the prescription drug inflation. Figure 1, I rail constantly to my students about labels. I apologize. I thought maybe a label got dropped in the movement from what was sent out earlier was a PDF file. But it is my bad that the figure 1 in the second document, which is prescription drug consumer price index, fails to label which graph is which. Look at that, and I went, I don't believe you. So the graph that goes up more rapidly, and I guess if we're going to print, are we going to send this out as a black and white? That maybe I should format it going out in color. Okay, then I can leave it.
When it goes out, it goes out in the PDF. And the PDF will be in color.
Right.
Now, when somebody goes to print the report, they don't print it in color, of course, it won't be in color. But
Gotcha.
it will go out in color.
So I might, where I was going, was should I modify this? So one's a dash line and one's perhaps I'll make them darker. Yeah, I've got this one darker that it shows up. The point here is that prescription drug prices have been increasing far at a constantly greater rate than the consumer price index as a whole. Figure 2 argues that we are increasing our proportion of healthcare spent on, or the proportion of GDP spent on healthcare. And again, this is a historical precedent. If you go far enough back to 1930, we were at 2% of the GDP. And now we're bumping off at 20% of the GDP on healthcare. Figure 3. So one of the questions becomes, should I add a prescription drug expenditure percent of GDP to this graph? As a percent?
If you could do it
I think
without holding up, getting it delayed.
Yeah, no, I can do it.
What about people on the board? Do you think having the drug as a percent of GDP and adding it would be helpful? It's over here talking about the increase, but doesn't want to talk about it relative to the GDP.
Can I just make a comment on this?
Please.
Just quickly reading through your introduction. It's great, but I'm not sure this part of it. I think the graphs could be in the final report, but the summary where we're talking about pharma and things like that, I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole as a part of the PDAB. We've worked closely with pharma, and they're just one part of the picture, and so I'm just concerned about us getting a little political and.
I totally understand. It's why I didn't format it and put it into this document.
Well,
because it needs a discussion and a thought.
So what I'm wondering is, and this is a little bit radical, but I think these graphs and otherwise are really great. Have we fully reviewed these as a board?
No.
So what if we at one of our upcoming meetings actually had you do a presentation of these and include it in the next year's, if we think it's appropriate? And I don't want to sound super negative,
Right.
but I do want to be super sensitive because
I am aware
There-
of
we
my,
have to work with all different groups to be a well-functioning group, and I
So-
just want to be careful.
so what we're suggesting is scrap this as a chapter.
Yes,
I,
that's just my opinion. Because I think, but I do think this is worth a presentation to the board. And then also the people who are a part of this will be able to have some feedback as well. And
it is exactly for my concern of being overly pontificating, professorial, that I left it out of this document because I anticipated that there might be these kind of, this kind of issue, and I'm happy to do it either way. I'm not.
I'd still like to go through it though.
I now or then or whenever, sure, and I can update it and add more stuff.
Can we do that? Can we schedule that for a meeting?
Okay.
Make a motion, yeah.
So let me ask a question. Senator Rosenwald and Dr. Marsh, are you in concurrence of not including this document in this year's annual report and having a presentation by Dr. Woodward?
Yes, I think that would be the wisest thing to do politically at this point.
Yep,
Okay. All right. So we'll schedule this. How much time do you think we're gonna need in January to go through the budget and stuff like that? How much time would you like to have to present this?
I am a professor.
Okay, yeah, I get up.
More hours. You give me the slot.
You'll fill it, right? Let's target it for the 3rd of January. We can talk about the time and so forth, what I need from the other items on the agenda and see if there's enough time on the agenda that's not dedicated to those items, if that will meet the needs you need to get through this appropriately. Make
Thank
sense?
you.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Third document is an effort to take the table that was provided, I think at the last meeting, if I remember, and write up the results in a format that fit on the 8.5 by 11 kind of sheets. So to do that, basically what I've done is table 1 is just looking at the membership column that they reported, and then calculating the percent share and calculating the percent of the population, just pulling that off of the census report on the Google. Table 2 is just a printout of it. So we need to focus on vocabulary here because the concept of cost, the word costliest drug can have 2 interpretations. I think the interpretation is, as I understand it, that's consistent with the legislature is the drugs on which the largest expenditure is made. So that is the first table that HHS gave us, just reporting the ranks. So that's the most expensive drugs, and pretty much just off that table.
It's the most,
Expensive in the
it's
expenditure.
with most of the expenditures. So it's the highest amount that was spent on that.
During the year,
During the year.
calendar year. Yep, according to the
And that's-
data set.
Now, is that gonna include both the patient copay as well as the insurance?
Yes,
So it's total, it's patient and.
that's
insurance.
exactly right. That's exactly right. The second, now table 3 is the same list of the most expensive drugs. Where I've broken out what I had, not knowing my pharmaceuticals, the first thing I did was to add to the table that HHS gave us, what they're treated for. And that is the second column of table 3. And what I noticed immediately was the importance of diabetes in the drugs bought. And so I did a quick tabulation of what was expenditures related to diabetes. And then with a column of that, pointing out that 153.5 or so million spent on the 7 prescription drugs related to diabetes is about 1/3 of the top most 25 expenditures. That seems noteworthy.
It does. One of the things, if we could,
Yep. Please
is
ask question
you've got,
anytime.
we're looking for, to make that point. Do you want to put another box down below this or somehow, because this is group of 25. The total for the group of 25 is not 153. It's one from the page before.
Okay, yeah.
So that's gonna be
Right,
1.7 million, right?
Yep. So
And then-
that's,
Then you put down in these drugs as total for the top, if you will. 153 is these items here, the top 25 would be the number below that, and then you can put a percentage. I think it's important to make that point.
Okay, yeah,
So
they can put it in the table, it's not just in the text. Yep, can do that.
0.79, okay.
The next table is taking Tom,
Oh, that's Billy.
Oh, 3.5 billion.
and then everybody on the Zoom call, feel free to interrupt with questions as you might have them. So if you go ahead,
Can I just go
Yeah.
back to
yes,
definitions?
please.
Just to be clear, we're using words expenditures, expenses, and expensive, I think. And the two major definitions that I would think are per unit cost, which makes a single drug the most expensive drug. And then their per unit cost multiplied by utilization, which is the total cost of that drug as it's been used in the state of New Hampshire in this population. Is that correct?
Close. Our per unit cost that we decided on is per day.
Maybe this one here is actually 25.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Send them as well.
Who are we gathering this data from? Which payers?
This is the all payer claims database, the comprehensive health information system of
Oh.
HHS. It is the
So it's
data.
not public payers. It's all payers.
Yes. Although the data is divided by Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial health insurance.
What about state employees and retirees?
My reading of what was expected first was that we should use the data that was initially provided, and that we were not, at this year's annual report anyway, going to try and combine from the commercial what the state paid with Medicaid to generate a public or a New Hampshire state budget. But the data will, as I understand it, will support that kind of analysis.
I guess I'm wondering why we include Medicare, since
I think
it's really not state funds.
the authority of the board within under 126.55.
But this is not a spending card.
I think there's a crossover definition.
Yeah, so I think part of it is that in the statute, I don't think the statute breaks it out by the top 25 by payer, public on payer. It just says the top 25. I don't know the statute.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm playing with the data that was provided earlier on. And I am, I think my task is not to ask more complicated questions for this round of analysis. I agree that the board has been concerned with public payer responsibilities.
It is where we're ultimately trying to get to for spending targets, but go back and look what it says in the statute. This report, which is the annual report, this report shall also include the following information about prescription drugs, both brand name and generic. It goes 25 most frequently prescribed, 25 costliest as determined by total amount spent, the 25 drugs with the highest year-over-year increases. So it doesn't break it out by category. It just lumps them all together. I think we want to go to is eventually with spending targets is break it into public and non-public payers.
So for the purpose of the report.
Right.
can we? I feel like we're going into data analysis. Which I don't feel qualified to do because, we talked about whether we're gonna have a contractor do that, or that would be once we have all the data. But I think we can use the data that was presented to us to put in those three, was it three?
The three.
Yeah,
This is-
three
We
data
can-
points,
it-
and keep it as simple as possible for this year. Because we don't have data analytic, we haven't really done data analytics.
So. One of my predispositions when approaching data. Having spent much of my life trying to talk to doctors.
Oh,
And
my condolences.
that when I just present data. They're just like this glazing over. I have a really good friend and collaborator at Barnes Hospital, infectious disease guy.
That's where I did my training.
Ah, great.
Yeah.
We got to talk about who we know. Dr. Medoff eyes
I knew
would
Dr.
just,
Medoff.
just glaze over. I mean, it was like the lids came down. So I try and tell stories rather than just present data. And if I'm interpreting correctly, which I'm happy to do, again, why I didn't try and integrate this into the larger document was, this is the board, and it's needs to be sensitive to what the reception is going to be. I can just put those tables down exactly as they presented them, without any explanation.
That would be my preference, because I think this is a great discussion that we need to have, but we haven't really had it yet.
Okay.
And I'm just one person. But I think since we're overdue on time, and since you've already put in so much effort, this would be something, I think this is exactly what we should be doing. Within the statute,
Right.
But I just think for the purposes of this,
Report. Do it.
we
Okay.
should just report, and then we can, I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but that's my feeling.
I think we should hold people. I'm totally flexible and think that the board is largely political, trying to deal with difficult subjects. And if an academic were to be given those leads.
So in saying that,
Up in the hot water.
so in saying that, Dr. Chairman, which one of these tables should we?
What were
include in
the
report?
three again?
The three are here.
I think that my judgment is just to pull the tables off
I just pulled the tables
Yeah.
off of the presentation
and not talk about it.
and give the credit to the presenter that presented them.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Well, should
Be good.
we talk about where the data came from at all?
Well, I
as
told
a narrative, but
Yeah.
not as an interpretive.
Correct.
In other words, data was presented by, I can't remember who did it, but
Andrew,
Group, yeah.
Andrew.
the same,
data was presented by Andrew and.
Or his
and-
office.
And here are the statutory requirement data for
Okay.
the annual report,
So,
and leave it at
easy.
that.
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay,
That's it.
My feeling is that this discussion reflects what we discussed when Andrew brought us the data in the first place. And it makes it much more useful to someone who's not in group who may look at this report, which I think is important as far as continuing this group going forward. But what I would do is I would elaborate on the statement on page 10, where you say the information in these initial tables raise more questions than provide answers, period. I think we need to elaborate on that and say that the board anticipates data analysis will be part of its function going forward, and including the segregation of data from public and private payers. So we get to the issue that Senator Rosenwald got to earlier. And I think combining those things makes this a better report than just presenting what Andrew gave us in the minutes some months ago.
So I got presenting what Andrew gave us, that we anticipate dealing with problems, and in particular, spending time on giving attention to public-private split of payers. But then, I mean, that's just the tables plus those comments. Have I captured the essence of what you're saying?
I think so, yes.
So I think if I go back and looking at this document again with the opening paragraph should stand as it is.
What about the opening page? Which is really just a description of the data set. That was taken, that's not interpreted,
No.
that's just taken from public documents, so,
The third paragraph could go,
okay?
but I think the initial paragraph, the second paragraph is basically talking about where the data is coming from. And I think also the last paragraph in here is again, being clear the data is only collected by those who reported it. This is not comprehensive. There's limitations to it.
Yep.
I think it's important people understand the limitations to the data. But the third paragraph,
I would
I take out.
That's why they have to be labeled, who's included and who's not included in the table, because it's that odd with the statutory authority of the board. If tables include all payers in the New Hampshire CHIS, that should be just indicated with a simple footnote.
Correct. If you want to go back and saying is that we're complying with the statute requirement.
Right, but that should be.
In here.
Table here includes lots of entities that are outside of the authority of this board. So the subsequent descriptive tables that follow should just have a simple footnote, who's included, who's not. On each of the tables, each of the.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Otherwise, it's demonstrably false and misleading. Okay.
Okay.
That's all. So Medicare, Medicaid, and the. I'm not gonna run those reports, so I would just put who's in, who's not. All tables should check that, like you told us. Right?
And I would say, if that's the case, maybe the second page on, it's not so much in table one, but where it's coming down to, because on the back of this is where the data, which components with.
Three parameters,
Right.
top 25 most frequent, top 25 most costly, top 25 with the highest year-to-year increases, should all have footnotes. What payers are in there and what payers are not, so it's clear.
So in addition to the footnote, the question I'm asking is, should we also be sure this second page is in there as well?
Were you commenting?
Yes. Because what it does,
That's a matter of debate. I would suggest include only the entities that are under the purvey of this board, but I'm not sure that you agree with that. So that should be in there because it points to a broader population of payers that are beyond the autonomy of this board. I'm not sure why you would include all of those in there because they're not the public payers that are defined in the first section of 1.60B.
Because
others in commercial, they're not.
because the statute did not break it apart.
For the annual report.
Right.
Right.
So that's what we're talking
That's
about.
right.
It's the end.
Yeah, but it's a little, it's printed, so it just deserves further explanation. So that you can have.
So why don't we-
Sensitivity and specificity in this report.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
what you could do is you could put a disclaimer at the bottom
Yeah.
of each of them that
Just
just
label
says
them.
some of the data in this may reflect Medicare, commercial payers and
Yeah, and.
I mean, I would
As an
just,
example, if the 25 most frequently prescribed drugs among the public payers is fundamentally different compared to the entire payer population in New Hampshire. That's an example of bias in this report. And you'd like to try to minimize that, there's nothing at all by communicating to the reader who's included and who's not.
I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm on the same page with you. All I'm asking was that there's a footnote which is talked about the payers. That what this does, it helps people understand what the breakout is of those payers. They're two separate questions.
Yeah. Yeah, he's asking, I think you're asking for a footnote on the bottom of every page. Of this table as we. As we've done.
And I would-
I'm just when I'm reading that. The way reader.
What I'm trying to help the reader understand is that when they see the footnote, they may ask the questions, what's the breakout by payer?
Yeah.
And this helps the reader understand what the breakout is.
But it's not broken down that way. It's aggregated all together.
That's
So it should be broken down that way. But it's not. So, given that the data that we had to work on for this report has only Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial. It doesn't show, for example, within the commercial, how many are government employees.
right. So that's the disclaimer you need.
That's why we need the disclaimer.
Right.
So
The-
future tables may well have that be more specific, but for the purposes of
So-
this report, I would put a disclaimer.
We've got the disclaimer.
Right.
And I think I understand how to do the disclaimer. What I'm asking about is whether, for example, on table. I guess it's not
Table one.
but the second table, which is the top 25 drugs with the highest amount paid expenditure. Whether I should include columns there of the amount that's Medicare, the amount that's Medicaid, and the amount that's commercial payer. Would that be any additional? It doesn't speak. It doesn't speak to your specificity by doing that, but that's the analyst decision. No, actually, the analyst is trying to figure out what would be it somehow. It's not going to be a solution to your problem. If you wanted to improve the specificity, you would include the parent payer code or the public payer. We're not going to get that data this time.
Hold on. We're not trying to get into data analysis here.
Okay.
Because we're headed.
Short
What we're
answer.
trying to do is be sure we're complying with the statute.
Done.
The annual report. The
Gotcha.
statute is very clear that just says the top 25 does not break it out by payer class or by anything else, just about the aggregation of the data. We should stay with the aggregation data. Your points well made. It should be a footnote on the data. This is comprehensive of Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial.
Yes.
So the person who's reading it understands, well, this is not strictly public payers, this is all payers.
And
We all sound like.
Yeah.
Senator Rosenwald. Dr. Marsh, We all-
Senator Rosenwald had to leave for another meeting, and
okay,
so she's not here anymore.
so I think as far as this. Because I think the data has to have a little bit of a narrative to how you get the data. Because I think it's important people understand what the source of the data and where it's coming from. So the first. Here is the first paragraph, second paragraph, and the last paragraph basically tells about why we have to report it. 2, where it's coming from, and then 3, it's got in the third paragraph, some disclaimers in here. Are we all on the same page?
Yes, it's hard to catch everything when more than one person is talking at once, but I got the gist of that and I agree with that.
And then what we'll do is each one of the tables will have 3 tables. Which is required by the statute. Highest utilization. We're doing that by day supply. Highest gross paid, which is going to be both the patient and as well as the carrier. And the highest year over year. That's
that
it.
is what I will do.
Sounds good. And when,
Can I ask a question
Oh, sure
about
can.
the future? So the highest expenditure is a function of the highest utilization. We have that data. And the highest cost per day. We don't have that data. I would request that for next year's annual report, we look forward to requesting that data also. the top 25 highest, because it turns out, I observed that when you look at the highest increase, that corresponds well with the highest expenditures. The drugs that we're spending the most on are the drugs that are the costliest per day, not the drugs that are used the most per day. We don't have this cost per day highest 25. I think we should be thinking about getting that data for next year.
I agree with you.
I think you could add that statement to the statement on page 10.
Good idea.
Page 10.
Page 10 of the annual report.
Of this document. That's
There's
the
a
one that
blank
says
page.
that it raises more questions than answers.
It's the page that's blank that just has that one sentence. Next to the last, yeah.
You could probably, if it's
Put that in
okay,
there.
put that in fourth paragraph on the first page. Again, be sure that it raises more questions than answers.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what-
what you may want to do is, the narrative is saying, the goal of the board is to try to come up with more answers.
I don't think any of that's necessary.
No,
For the purpose of the report, it's kind
Yeah,
of
this
getting
is the report going
sort
forward.
of
I just wanted to-
speculative
yes,
and whimsical, but it might be the place to put that, if you're looking for a place to put,
in the,
is in the summary on page 9 of the report. Goals for the coming year include, and I would put in a number 6, which is to optimize data analytics to meet the goals of the statute.
yeah.
And I would not get
That's a-
it, on this piece. I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking in terms of the blocking of it. The first page of the document, at the end of the first paragraph, after that, rather than saying the New Hampshire Comprehensive Health is the state's best source of this information, I would say was utilized to provide this information as required by statute. Because we don't have enough of experience to know if it's the best source. And it's obviously has shortcomings, which have been pointed out, which are that it's comprehensive and we need to break it down so that we get to the focus of this, what the statute asks us to do. So
So let me repeat your words. Instead of is the state's best source of information, delete that and insert was utilized to provide this information as required by the statute.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got the explanation of what Chiz is, and then getting rid of that third paragraph keeps it a little more on point,
And we'll just take the second part of the back page, which is table 1, completely off. That's all. I think it's confusing because it's in the same thing that Jason's talking about, is that we really are focused statutorily as far as on public payers.
Okay.
I think we just leave it as a disclaimer at the bottom of each table.
right?
The data includes sources from the following: Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial.
I'm just curious about the rationale for doing that, because it seems like it deviates from statute. If you're bringing everything in and then put in a disclaimer, why are we even bringing anything in? Why don't we just focus in on what the statute specifically mandates us to do?
Because we don't have it.
You don't have,
Don't have what?
We don't have the specific state-based public payer cost.
But then it seems like we're mixing, apples and oranges in a sense. if you keep putting disclaimers.
We are mixing apples and oranges, and we really want just the oranges.
Right, that's what I'm
Or
saying.
just the apples. So what we're saying is, here's the data we have available. That meets the statute.
And
But then we put in the disclaimer to say, but caution is advised when you,
or why we have number 6 on the goals for next.
correct.
Yeah, right, gotcha, okay. I'm just trying to understand the rationale for even including data that is not.
I think we have to.
Yeah, I see, it gives you some, and that's why I think it's appropriate to say in January, this data is given to us to say, this is what's out there, but now we're gonna try to focus in honing it down to what is applicable to statute.
I think, correct. I think one of the things we're trying to do is meet the statutory obligations. And the statutory obligation not break it down that way, but you're all right. We need to get down to the public payer.
Right.
But that wasn't. In the statute wasn't, first of all, wasn't available. Number two, may not even be available, you break it apart. But to meet the statutory requirement, the top 25 of each one of the categories. The statute didn't talk about only the public payers per se. And I think it's back to the clarification for us as we go forward. Is breaking apart the fruit in the basket and saying, right now we have a basket of fruit.
Right.
But subsequently, what the goals is gonna be is break it back the oranges, the apples and the pears.
I agree, okay, so just so.
And we probably would have gotten into this
Yeah.
past year, except we had this thing called rules,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
which was a little distracting.
God, rule.
9 rules. So I,
Can I just say,
oh,
well,
sure, please.
Bob, thank you for being so open to feedback, and I just want to make sure this is incredible work what you've done, and I, for one, really appreciate the time you spent in it, and so I don't want to
I'm
sound,
happy to, I recognize that I'm kind of a, I don't know, black or odd duck anyway. In the room, and that. I tend to take a ball and run with it farther than.
that's great.
It's good.
Yeah, we need you, but the
Not
rest of
today.
us have dealt with these annual reports, till we're blue in the face, and so. But that's why I think if you can bring it back,
I would look forward to bringing it back, if we can go back to Andrew actually and get the top 25 cost per day data. Then the report that I give to, in January, next year. If it makes it on the January, could include more.
I think January we talked about about the initial report about things over time and how they escalated. What we're having now, I think, is a separate conversation about the data analytics of the data itself. I think that's what I heard before, going back and.
so that means you've got 2 jobs,
Yeah.
2 elections.
This one here is,
Right.
and then we can talk about, we'll work with Andrew, to your point, subsequently.
Okay.
Because that'll be part of number 6 that Dr. Sherman put on the to-do list. Is optimization of the data.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things I want to point out though, Bob, it's on the report, page 50, there's a PSAO pharmaceutical supply chain. It looks like you had a
So which document, big document?
big
now?
document, yes, on page 50. Yes, question mark, do you need
Oh,
it?
yes,
Is that
that's the
missing?
other one you saw. Yeah, so I don't have that.
Can we get that to him, please? And then the other one was,
It wasn't on the, I mean, I was surfing the, our webpage.
we have Nancy. And then the other one's the September minutes, and you include the October one as well?
Sure.
Bill brings right up to.
Yep.
Okay,
Is
And then-
it fair to say that once we have established an executive director and assistant, that we would be able to then go from 50,000 foot down to the more micro statutory,
Yes.
focus?
yes,
Right, okay.
and get beyond the rules, yes. That's the intent.
One,
Oh, go ahead.
one tiny typo
Tiny typo.
on page 4.
Never produced
Page
something
4.
like that.
There should be no apostrophe on its.
So this is which document?
This is
The
the
big one?
annual report, page 4.
Or line?
Well, it's the 4th paragraph. It's just one
Oh, I
sentence.
see, yeah, it's. It's, that's true.
My grammar
Did you read the whole
teacher.
thing
yeah.
that closely?
No, that just always jumps out at me. It's,
Yeah,
Yeah,
pick up on that.
thank you, yeah.
So. For Bob's. Direction and so forth, at this point in time, we're okay with the draft of what's here. With the correction and with the grammar, at least that one there,
In number 6.
and number
Number
6.
six.
And then at the same time, we'll go back and add September. Minutes, October minutes, and we can put a narrative in there about those minutes,
Yes,
okay? And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the one as far as this one, as far as the.
we're talking.
Gonna toss it.
Yep.
The other thing which I would suggest is because the statute that's in here was the old statute.
Yeah.
Did you take the new statute
Right,
and update it? This, I think it came from Westlaw or something like
Yes,
that.
and to update you on that, I've sent the word versions already.
To. that order.
Yeah, and I copied you with Mr. Chair.
Okay.
But they should be, I gave you 2 options to use.
So we'll have the correct. We have the correct
I'll play
version.
it in a second.
Okay. So is there any other discussion at this point in time that we need on minutes? I mean, on board annual review. Annual report. Well set?
so I would like to give myself this weekend. To get to you the package. Modified, edited. But I think it would be useful to have as many eyes on it. as
I would, if you take what you have and edit it, I would send it out to all the board members. Again, for the right to know law,
Yes,
we can't have discussion about the minutes, but we can give feedback to. Dr. Wood. Individual. We
which
can't
I
do
would
it.
appreciate.
That'd be very helpful. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor
Mr. Chair.
to approve.
The question behind.
Hold on. Public comment before they- Oh, yes, comments, thank you.
you want to finish the motion?
Well, I was gonna do a motion on this one and have a public comments, but do you want to comment before we go on this? Okay. all right. Does everybody want to make comments like we had on the annual report at this point in time? Have a motion on the floor to accept the annual report as presented with the modifications as we so discussed during the board meeting.
Good motion.
Motion second. Roll call, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Dr. Murphy,
Yes.
Dr. Woodward,
Yes,
Dr. Marsh.
Yes,
Yes. So thank you for that. And again, thank you, Bob, for all the work you're doing this.
it's
Hey,
fun.
Bob.
Yeah. Now, public comments. please.
Thank you. For the record, Heidi Cole with Gallagher, Callahan, Gartrell. I have a couple of questions. One is at the Joe Carr meeting, when they approved the rules, there was some level of discussion about some sort of cost benefit analysis about the fees. And as I understood it, the cost of the fees and the benefit of the fees to the parties who are assessed. And so I didn't hear any discussion about that. So I was just wondering what the board thinks.
You're right, we didn't talk about that. Part of it is we don't have. So without understanding, I think what Jelcar is trying to get to. Was the Jelcar is looking at it saying, okay, if you have fees that you assess, what's the benefit to the people to assess the fee? So that's both. I guess what I'm trying to get to, I don't know if we can, Jelcar can make the assessment if we don't know what the cost is gonna be. What the budget is gonna be, but I think the other part which you raised was a question, which is more constitutional. Which the rule itself was constitutionally, it's a law and itself. Because if the people being assessed the fee are not getting a benefit. Then looking at that point in time and saying, does the statute stand? It said, no, these are fees. So there's 2 parts of it. One is gonna be, the cost benefit analysis is what's the cost? We don't know that until we get the budget back. The other one's constitutional, we look at and saying, regardless of the cost. Is there enough benefit going back to the people assessed the fee? In order to justify it in the first place? That was my understanding. Is that yours or do you think it's different?
I'm not. None of that came from us, so I don't know what, and I, same discussion you did, but I was just wondering, I left there having the impression that there was some sort of timeline to respond to Jelcar, so.
No, so what happened is based on the testimony received, when we were there that morning. The committee attorneys didn't have a chance to fully review it because it was given them that morning while we were sitting there. They were going to review, and if anything needed to be done further, they would contact us, and petition would be filed for us to enter rulemaking. At this time, I have heard nothing, so I'm assuming no news is good news at this point. And they'd be pretty quick to review something like that, especially where we were at the meeting, and I mean, we have next steps we have to move forward with.
One of the things that was also raised, I think, at the gel was by Griffin McGuire, was a cost benefit analysis, not just for this work, for all works. So I think the issue that was raised with gel was greater than just this board. It's looking at it globally within the state, saying, when you have a board, when you have a benefit, you look at the cost benefit ratio or analysis for them. If you have boards exceeding more than 25%, I mean, that's back to the same thing, is that's what the argument is, that the board is indirectly using fees as a form of taxation in order to go into the general credit. But when you exceed it, that's the whole cost benefit analysis that they're trying to get to, not just the board itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was more of an overarching, nothing specific for us to do at this time.
And I do have a second question.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm trying to meet you back here.
Thank you for-
Get over there.
Thank you for
Yeah,
addressing the first one. My second one is. Going back, my recollection is, and I'm going back at least a year, maybe longer, when this board had the discussion about the fees. And I know there was discussion about trying to identify the universe of entities, not just pharmaceutical manufacturers, but all of the entities that are listed in the law, trying to identify that universe in terms of who would be assessed. And so one, trying to come up with a count, and also trying to figure out like who's the actual contact person where an invoice would be sent. So I was just wondering if you've made any progress with that. And my other, it kind of dovetails what you were just talking about with the 125. I noticed the 350,000 is assuming assessing the known pharmaceutical manufacturers. I think the count was 700 times the $500 fee. That's where the 350,000 came from. But there are other entities in the law. There's supposed to be assessed, and so that would. And I think the PBMs also maybe are assessed at the 500 level, and then other entities at the 100 level, insurance carriers being one. And so my question is, have you looked at that universe again and come up with a number, like when you send out all these invoices, what is your expected revenue coming in from not just the 700 pharmaceutical manufacturers, but everybody else in the universe times their fees? What does that number look like?
That's why I'm gonna reach out to you, find help for reach out to you for your help identifying who the entities are within your universe, so you can be sure that we have all the appropriate parties.
Great. I sorry to interrupt you. I think that at the time when Tyler Brannon was still here, he had data, at least in terms of who's regulated by the insurance department. I mean, from AHIP's perspective, we're just, I mean, not even, there are health insurance carriers who are not AHIP members, as an example. So,
And that's what we did last year. We reached out to pharma. We reached out to other organizations, other trade organizations, in order to try to understand within their organizations who qualifies for registering the board.
Yeah.
That's step one. So we did some last year, right, Nancy?
Yes.
We sent out emails. We have several that come back. So there's two parts to the budget. One's going to be the expense side, and what you're talking about here is going to be the revenue side, which is the expense fees. So in order for us to make the assessment on assess fees, we have to understand how many entities out there we can make assessments on. So the way the rule was created, depending upon what class you're in, it's between $500 to $1,000 or $100 and $200. But we have to then look at the universe, to your point, and say, okay, within that universe, respective universes, if you will, is deciding how much do we have to make the acceptance fee in order to cover the expenses. But I need to reach out to different organizations again to help, ask for their help, to identify who are the entities within their universe, so we can clearly identify who they are.
I guess I'm just confused. If your budget is 350,000 and you know that you could collect that simply by doing $500 on the 700 pharmaceutical manufacturers, when you add in everybody else, doesn't that bump up against your 125 rule?
It should, it could, but until we grind the numbers, I won't know. I mean, the board won't know.
Well,
So-
also the 350 is not a real number. I mean, you're gonna be coming back with a budget in January, which is probably gonna be a little bit higher because we're going to have a higher salary for the executive count. So hopefully no helicopters and my response would be, we're going to have to use every source to find out who we're actually going to be billing. That's gonna be agencies, it's gonna be pharma, it's gonna,
Wholesale.
make sure we're not missing anybody. But we don't even have an invoice yet, so I think we've got a lot of rulemaking really took up the bulk of what we were doing this year, and now we've got to get down to the work. And I think a lot of this comes also when we have an executive director, because that would be their job, is to be doing all of this work. So as soon as we have these things in place, then we can. But you bring up what's the cart and what's the horse? It's really what you're talking
Right.
about. Because you don't want to be, I don't want to be overcharging anybody. And then, so I think we really have to be careful in how we work out the budget, and then we identify who needs to be billed, and then we make the assessments. And
It's a work in progress more than anything else. And you raise some of the good points. We don't want to over assess, but we don't want to under assess, but also at the same time, is that we want to ensure that everyone's paying their fair share of it at the same time. That's why I think it's important that we reach out to the trade association, as many people as possibly can, make sure the universe that we're working with is as comprehensive as possible. So whatever the assessment fees are, that A, it's shared equally, and B, we don't go above the 125%. But right now, those universes which you're pointing out, we have a start, but we don't have a final number.
Thank you.
Because back in December, the 700 is based upon what we went through the analysis coming over from the Board of Pharmacy, looking at different things, wholesale and so forth. That's where the number came from. But we have to test it too. We have to send information to them after. And then send us back and so forth, because that 700 is good on top. It can go 1,000.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Yes.
it does underscore that our top priority really is to get an executive
Oh.
director.
Say that for a year. You want to volunteer?
No. No.
Any more public comments? Allison, I don't know who, any comments you'd like to make? Anyone on the Zoom who wants to make public comments or anything at this point in time? So a reminder, we have a meeting on January 3rd at 1 o'clock here at the Brown Building. On the agenda will be the MOU, reviewing an invoice and a budget, and also
Just a
Thank you.
reminder that Representative Marsh and I think it's just the two of us, will no longer have legislative emails. So you have to use our personal.
I've been doing that for some time, Tom, so I'm good.
Yeah. That's not very optimistic.
It worked better.
He's speechless. All right, can we have undebatable
All
motion
right.
to adjourn? At
So moved.
10:50. So moved.
Second.
Everyone have a good holiday. Enjoy it. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you again for all the work you did.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Great work.
Yes.
What I did was, I took